Jody Wilson-Raybould is disputing what Liberal sources tell CBC News. She's insisting that she did not demand that SNC-Lavalin face a criminal trial as a condition for her to help end the controversy. Wilson-Raybould is repeating that position in an interview this morning with CBC Radio in Vancouver. As we've been reporting, Liberal sources told CBC News that the former Attorney General set out at least 5 conditions to end her politically damaging dispute with the Prime Minister. Here she is, speaking with Early Edition host Stephen Quinn.
Sources have told CBC News that you laid out a number of conditions for the Prime Minister and his staff to end this disagreement over the SNC-Lavalin affair sooner rather than later. Conditions like having key people fired. Did you ask that Gerald Butts, Michael Wernick, and Mathieu Bouchard be fired?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I do not respond to leaked information from anonymous sources. Other than to say or to note that the continual use and inappropriate use of this tactic is something that I can't respond to. I'm still covered by a waiver with respect to this particular issue. But what I can say is that I had hoped all along from the very beginning that the Prime Minister would have accepted some responsibility for wrongdoing in this case and essentially apologize to Canadians.
I understand not wanting to respond to unnamed sources, but that's exactly why I'm asking the question. I'd like to hear it from you rather than from unnamed sources. Did you ask that Gerald Butts, Michael Wernick, and Mathieu Bouchard be fired?
There was a number of conversations that was had, but those conversations came after January the 14th, after I was shuffled out as the Attorney General, and those conversations are still covered by confidence, and I respect the confidences that I had.
So is what those unnamed sources are saying, is it true?
There were a number of discussions. What I will say about those conditions that were reported, one of them was around whether or not the current Attorney General would issue a deferred prosecution agreement. And I have to say unequivocally that I would never interfere with the independence of the Attorney General.
So you did not seek an assurance that your replacement, David Lametti, would not overrule the Director of Public Prosecutions and direct her to give SNC-Lavalin a deferred prosecution agreement?
I would absolutely never do that. I'm very clear on what my role was as the Attorney General, and the discussion that we've been having for the last number of months is around the fundamental principle of prosecutorial independence, a principle that I have upheld and will continue to uphold.
In that list of conditions, did you say anything at all about how the incoming Attorney General should proceed with the case against SNC-Lavalin?
Of course I didn't. I wouldn't, as the previous Attorney General, accept any direction in terms of how I conducted myself as the Attorney General, and I certainly would never do that to this Attorney General or any other.
Did you ask for an apology from the Prime Minister, either in caucus or in public?
I have hoped for the Prime Minister, and I've had opportunity to speak with him, that he would have taken some responsibility for this situation, for the wrongdoing, and I think an apology to Canadians would have gone a long way.
Well, let's bring in Janice McGregor from Ottawa, who's been watching all of this along with the rest of us. Let's start with that big chunk of the interview we just played. How does Jody Wilson-Raybould, in terms of what she's saying, fit with what CBC reporting has said?
Yeah, it's been very interesting listening to that again. You know, Stephen Quinn, CBC Vancouver's host there, really trying to go over the various conditions that were said to be in play in these weeks of conversations between Wilson-Raybould and the Prime Minister's office to try and negotiate some kind of a truce in this affair. Now, Jody Wilson-Raybould has never really wanted to talk about leaked stories, going back to the original February 7th Globe and Mail report about the apparently inappropriate pressure put on her about this SNC-Lavalin decision. Nevertheless, you heard Stephen Quinn there going over the various pieces there on whether she asked for anybody to be fired. There were 3 people apparently that CBC News has reported that she wanted fired. According to sources on that, she says conversations did happen after the cabinet shuffle on January 14th, but because the waiver of cabinet confidence that Prime Minister Trudeau gave her does not apply to things after January 14th, she believes that she cannot discuss those conversations. But it was interesting in terms of other things she was asking for, the reporting that she wanted a public apology from Prime Minister Trudeau. She's basically confirmed that, yes, she has wanted that all along. She hoped Trudeau would acknowledge wrongdoing and say so publicly, that she thought that was important. And in the final matter, this issue of what sources were saying she was asking for early on, that she wanted the incoming Attorney General, David Lametti, to be told not to overturn the decision of the Public Prosecutor's Office not to negotiate a remediation agreement with SNC-Lavalin, of course, that alternative to a criminal prosecution. On that matter here, it was interesting to hear her say what she told the National last night in writing, that no, I would absolutely never do that. I'm clear on what my role was as an Attorney General, and upholding sort of that she would not interfere in the independent decision making of the Attorney General. She took some criticism yesterday, the suggestion that in seeking to tie David Lametti's hands, she was being a bit hypocritical if the point here was to uphold the independence of the Attorney General. So interesting, after not commenting on the CBC story at first, now she wants to be clear that she would never advocate interference with the current Attorney General.
The interview, almost 30 minutes, and it covered a lot of territory. So she talked about the political consequences for the Liberal Party in an election year, and also answered some questions about her political future. Take us through some of that.
Yeah, really interesting. She said that being in federal politics has been challenging, but she feels fortunate to have been involved in some of the major legislative changes that have come in the time that she was Justice Minister. Of course, the assisted dying legislation, just to take one example. But listen to what she says about the way forward for her.
I was a member of the Liberal Party. I still believe in the values and the principles of equality and inclusion and justice that I feel underpin the Liberal Party, and so many Canadians signed up for the Liberal Party back in 2015, believing in the same thing, believing in doing politics differently, entering into federal politics. The vision that the now Prime Minister and I shared back then is still the same vision, and the same values for me underpin that vision around ensuring that everybody has a voice, and ensuring equality and inclusion in decision making and a different way of doing politics. I absolutely still believe in that.
So she said she's disappointed not to be able to run again as a Liberal MP, but she's open to being involved in federal politics in some way. She's going to talk to her family and her constituents and volunteers back in the riding. She's on her way home to Vancouver today to figure out what comes next. But regardless, she's vowing to continue to speak out about the importance of reconciliation and recognizing the rights of First Nations in order to transform Canada's relationship with Indigenous peoples.
Thanks for this, Janice. Janice McGregor reporting in Ottawa.